Somewhere in Kenya, there's an elephant who is about 40 years old now. When she was 3, poachers killed her mother. Researchers found her 2 days later, dehydrated, still standing next to the body. A local conservation team took her in, nursed her back, released her into the wild. 20 years later, field researchers documented something they didn't have a clean explanation for. When vehicles carrying that same organization's markings approached, she didn't move away. She moved toward them. Not trained, not conditioned with food, something else. Start with how animal memory actually works, because most people have the model wrong. We tend to assume animals live in the present, that they don't carry a past the way we do, that pain fades once the threat is gone, and fear doesn't linger longer than survival requires. Neuroscience says otherwise. In mammals, from mice to whales, the amygdala encodes emotionally charged events with a priority that neutral memories don't get. The more intense the experience, the deeper the encoding. This isn't unique to humans. It's one of the oldest features of the vertebrate brain. A system designed to make sure that whatever almost killed you, you remember. But memory isn't just storage, it's recognition. In 2011, researchers at the University of Chicago published findings on rats that had been exposed to painful stimuli administered by specific handlers. When those same handlers returned, same scent, same movement pattern, the rats showed anticipatory fear responses before anything happened. They weren't reacting, they were predicting. The body was already preparing for what the mind had filed away. The handler hadn't done anything yet, the memory did it for them. Crows take this further in a way that's harder to dismiss. John Marsliff at the University of Washington ran a study where researchers wore specific rubber masks while trapping and banding crows. After release, those crows began scolding anyone who wore that mask, not strangers in general, not people who moved similarly, that exact face. Years later, crows that had never been trapped, juveniles born after the study ended, were also scolding the mask. The information had transferred, parent to offspring, through behavior, a cultural memory of a specific human threat passed down like a warning across generations. The crow doesn't need to be hurt by you personally, it inherits the verdict. Elephants operate on a different scale entirely. Karen McComb at the University of Sussex documented that elephants in Amboseli could distinguish between two local groups, the Maasai and the Kamba, purely by voice and smell. The Maasai had a history of occasional conflict with elephants. The Kamba did not. When elephants heard a Maasai voice on a recording, they clustered, went silent, and moved downwind. Kamba voices produced almost no reaction. They weren't responding to human. They were responding to that specific category of human, based on accumulated information stored across the herd over time. Now flip it. Because the same architecture that encodes threat encodes something else too. Elephants rescued from mud pits in Kenya have been documented making deliberate trunk contact with the people who freed them before walking away. The trunk is an elephant's primary sensory organ, 40,000 individual muscles, nerve density comparable to human fingertips. When an elephant extends its trunk to touch something slowly and holds the contact, it is not a casual gesture. It is an examination, a registration. Some of these animals stayed near their rescuers for minutes after being freed. No biological reason to remain. Threat gone, path clear, and yet, present. Standing near the humans who helped, before eventually moving away. In rehabilitation contexts, wolves that had been injured and treated by specific handlers have shown reduced threat responses when those handlers returned for follow-up care, responses that didn't generalize to other humans. The nervous system had filed a distinction. This one is different. What's happening at the neurological level is something researchers call context-dependent fear extinction. The threat response doesn't erase, it gets tagged. The brain builds a record not just of what happened, but of who was there and what they did. Over time, repeated neutral or positive interactions with a specific individual can suppress the fear response, but only for that individual. The file stays open, it just gets updated. This is why the question isn't really whether animals remember people who hurt them. They do. The more interesting question is whether they remember people who helped, and whether those two things are stored the same way. The evidence suggests they're not. Trauma encoding and positive social encoding recruit different neural pathways. Negative experiences activate the amygdala intensely and consolidate fast. One exposure can be enough for a lifetime of recognition. Positive experiences, particularly those involving relief from extreme stress, encode differently, slower, but potentially more durable in social species where relationships carry survival value. A wolf that remembers a specific handler as safe has survival information. An elephant that recognizes a specific vehicle as non-threatening has survival information. The memory isn't sentiment, it's data. Now consider what this means for us, not as rescuers, but as a species. Humans have been interacting with animals for at least 300,000 years, hunting them, domesticating them, displacing them, occasionally helping them. And animals, across that entire span, have been building files, not on individuals, on us, on the patterns we produce, the sounds we make, the way we move through their world. The fear response modern wild animals show toward humans isn't learned from personal experience in most cases. It's inherited, encoded across generations of contact with a species that didn't fit any existing category. Not quite predator, not quite disaster, something new that required its own classification. But here's what that history also contains. Early humans lived inside ecosystems rather than above them. Hunter-gatherer groups moved with animal migrations, read animal behavior as environmental data, and, in some documented cases, developed what researchers describe as mutualistic relationships with specific species. The Baran people of Kenya historically used a bird called the greater honey guide to locate beehives. The bird would lead humans to honey, humans would leave wax and grubs behind. A functional partnership, maintained across generations on both sides. The honey guide didn't learn this behavior from watching humans. It inherited a readiness for it. A cognitive opening toward a specific kind of cooperation with a specific kind of creature. Which means the file animals carry on us isn't only threat. It contains, in some species, a record of something else. A category that sits alongside danger. Humans who move slowly. Humans who touch the trap, not the animal. Humans who come back. Humans who, in the long record of what our species has done, sometimes did something different. The humpback whale off the Farallon Islands who stayed in the water after her ropes were cut, swimming in circles, surfacing next to each diver individually before moving to the next, had spindle neurons. The same specialized cells found in humans, great apes, and elephants, associated with empathy and rapid social processing. The neurological architecture for something more than data processing was present in that animal. What she did with it that afternoon is something the data can describe but not enter. The elephant in Kenya who approaches certain vehicles is now 40 years old. She has a calf. The calf has been observed approaching those same vehicles too. The memory transferred. Whatever she encoded that day, the specific humans, the specific markings, the specific quality of what happened, it moved. Not through genetics, through behavior. The way crows pass down a face. The way elephants pass down a voice. The way the honey guide passes down an openness toward cooperation that predates any individual bird alive today. We tend to ask whether animals understand what we do to them. The research suggests a quieter, more precise answer. They don't hold it against you in the way we mean that phrase. They file you. They update the file when new information arrives. And in species with the cognitive architecture for it, they pass the file on. The bird that flew away from you today had a file on you before you were born. A species-level assessment built across thousands of years of contact that said, this one requires distance. But somewhere, there's also an elephant with a different file, built from a different kind of contact, updated over decades, passed to her calf, who has never needed a reason to be afraid of certain vehicles, because the memory arrived before the experience did. Animals don't forgive, they don't condemn, they remember. And memory, for them, has always been the difference between what survives and what doesn't.